It was a Tuesday afternoon when I got the message. I had just finished lunch and was sitting on the couch with my phone in my hand, scrolling through social media. Most of the day had been pretty uneventful. A couple of emails to answer, some work to catch up on, nothing too exciting. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary when my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from my older sister, Lauren. "Hey, we're going on a family cruise next week and we need you to watch the kids while we're away. Can you do it?" I stared at the message for a few seconds, blinking as if I could somehow make the words change. My mind was racing. I hadn't been told about any family vacation. In fact, I didn't even know they were planning one. I thought the whole family was busy with work and school. What was worse, I had never been invited to join the trip. I immediately felt a surge of frustration. Was this some kind of joke? Was I the afterthought? I mean, I loved my niece and nephew, and I'd happily spend time with them, but the way Lauren had phrased it, as if it was a given that I would just drop everything to babysit, really rubbed me the wrong way. Before I could fully process the text, another one popped up from her. "Hope that works. They're so excited. They really love spending time with you." There it was again, the assumption that I would be free to look after them while they went off to have a blast without me. I couldn't deny that I was annoyed. Sure, I'd agreed to babysit in the past, but this was different. This wasn't just a casual evening or a weekend. They were planning to be away for an entire week, and they hadn't even bothered to invite me. It felt like I was being asked to serve as the backup option, the one who would stay home and be responsible, while they got to go off and enjoy themselves. I sat there for a moment, feeling a mix of emotions, frustration, hurt, and a deep sense of being taken for granted. Was I really just that person? The one who always took care of things when no one else could be bothered? I put the phone down and let out a sigh. I didn't want to say yes. I didn't want to feel like I was being used, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't say no. They were family after all, and I had always tried to be there for them. I loved my niece, Emma, who was 8, and my nephew, Max, who was 5. They were sweet kids, and I knew they'd be excited to spend time with me. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't about them. It was about my sister and her husband, who had just assumed I'd drop everything to fill the role of the ever-apropos baby. I stared at the message again, considering what to do. The truth was, I didn't have any big plans for the week. My work was flexible, and I didn't have any vacations lined up, but that didn't mean I wanted to spend an entire week catering to 2 energetic kids while my sister and her husband lounged around on a cruise ship. They didn't even ask if I had anything I needed to get done. They just expected me to be available. It wasn't like they were even offering to pay me for the time I would be putting in. I was just supposed to be happy to help. I took a deep breath and replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Sure, I can watch them. What day are you leaving? I'll need to make sure I'm free." I stared at the screen after I sent the message, the knot in my stomach tightening. What had I just agreed to? I felt like I was signing up for something that was going to be far more taxing than I was ready for. I thought about what it would mean to spend an entire week playing the role of a full-time caregiver. Sure, it was temporary, and I could get through it, but why was it that I always ended up in these situations where I was expected to be the one who gave up my time for everyone else's convenience? My phone buzzed again, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a reply from Lauren. "Thanks so much. We're leaving on Friday afternoon. I'll drop off the kids on Thursday evening so you can get them settled before we go. I know it'll be a big help to us, and they're really looking forward to spending time with you. You're the best!" The message made my heart sink. Thursday evening? That meant I wouldn't have any time to myself before jumping into the role of full-time caretaker. I was going to be responsible for their meals, getting them to school, since they were still in school at the time, making sure they stayed entertained, and probably doing 100 other little things that no one had considered when they made their plans. I'd left the restaurant bureau in charge of making his card into the reel of Bill Pewdie's wife, Warren's father, since the birth of their son. I was expected to be the fun aunt who always had time for the kids, but I wasn't sure if anyone saw how much of an inconvenience this was to me. The more I thought about it, the more I felt frustrated. Why hadn't they even considered asking if I wanted to join the cruise? I had been to family trips before, even though they weren't always lavish. This time, though, it seemed like an easy decision for them to make. They just assumed I would stay behind. I wasn't important enough to be included in the fun, but I was certainly needed for the boring, everyday stuff. I could already feel the resentment building up. This wasn't how things should have gone. I should have been invited. I should have been part of the conversation. Instead, they had just assumed that I would take care of things for them. There was no acknowledgement of the fact that I had my own life, my own plans, and my own desires. I didn't exist just to fill in the gaps when their lives got busy. I set my phone down and rubbed my temples, trying to clear my head. I had agreed to it, after all. I couldn't back out now. But as the days went by and I thought about it more, I knew I would have to have a serious conversation with them when they got back. They needed to understand how hurtful it was to feel like I wasn't worth inviting, but still expected to be the go-to person when it was time to take care of the kids. I had to make a decision. I could go along with it, smile, and pretend it didn't bother me, or I could find a way to make them realize that their actions had hurt me. The first option seemed easier, but it also felt like I was letting them off the hook for taking me for granted. The second option would be more difficult, but it would allow me to stand up for myself. And in that moment, I wasn't sure which path I was going to take. But what I did know was that this would be a turning point. Whether I liked it or not, this week would change something in my relationship with my family, and I wasn't sure yet if that change would be good or bad. I picked up my phone again, staring at the screen. I needed to figure out how to make this work, but I also needed to set some boundaries. I wasn't going to let myself be the one who was always there for everyone else, without anyone ever thinking to consider me. The next few days were a blur of thoughts, emotions, and an overwhelming sense of discomfort. I had agreed to look after my niece and nephew, and the reality of the situation was beginning to settle in. I hadn't realized just how much resentment was building inside of me until I had a quiet moment to think it through. The truth was, I didn't want to spend a week as a full-time babysitter while everyone else was on a vacation. But now, with the agreement made, I felt stuck. Saying no would make me seem selfish, and I didn't want to disappoint anyone, especially my sister, who probably thought she was doing me a favor by giving me the opportunity to spend time with the kids. After all, it's not like she had asked me to babysit. She had expected me to do it. That night I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind kept replaying Lauren's message. "Hey, we're going on a family cruise next week, and we need you to watch the kids while we're away. Can you do it?" I kept turning it over in my head, over-analyzing each word, each phrase. She didn't ask if I wanted to watch the kids. She didn't ask if I had plans. She didn't even check if I was available or if it was a good time for me. It was as if she had simply assumed that I would be free to step in. The more I thought about it, the more I began to feel like I was nothing more than an unpaid nanny in their eyes. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the guilt. I was their family. I loved my niece and nephew. It wasn't their fault that I was frustrated with the situation. They would probably be ecstatic to see me, especially since I didn't get to spend as much time with them as I would have liked. The thought of disappointing them, of telling them that I couldn't take care of them, was unbearable. So, I resigned myself to the fact that I would be watching them, but that didn't make me feel any better about it. The next morning I woke up, still tired from thinking about everything all night. I got up and started making coffee, hoping it would help clear my head. I had already gone over the details of what the week would look like. Thursday evening I would meet them at their house, help the kids pack, and then stay with them until the following Friday, when Lauren and her husband Tim would return. I'd be responsible for making sure the kids stayed on their usual schedule, feeding them, making sure they did their homework, and generally keeping them entertained while their parents were having the time of their lives on a cruise. I could already picture how this would play out. They would be enjoying beautiful beaches, fancy dinners, and relaxing days at sea, while I would be running errands, cooking, and trying to keep two energetic kids happy. The 2 cruises I would normally have would be enough to count for just 127 hours in total, and all of this would be happening in the backdrop of my own personal frustration, the constant reminder that I had been left behind. I tried to focus on the positives. The kids loved spending time with me. I could make it fun for them. I could plan activities, take them to the park, or let them pick movies for movie night. I could be a good aunt and create memories with them, even if the circumstances were less than ideal. And maybe, just maybe, this could be a chance to bond with them in a way I hadn't had the chance to before. I could use this time to be more involved in their lives, something I didn't get to do often enough because of my own work schedule and the busy demands of my own life. But there was a part of me that was still angry, still upset. It wasn't just about the cruise. It wasn't just about the kids or their needs. It was about how this entire situation had unfolded. I felt invisible, as if I didn't matter unless they needed something from me. It wasn't just about this trip. It was about a long history of moments when my time, my feelings, and my needs had been overlooked for the sake of convenience. My sister Tim and the rest of the family had gotten used to me being the reliable one, the one who always said yes. And now, here I was, once again, stepping into a role I hadn't been asked to take, but had been expected to fill. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep letting this happen. I couldn't keep saying yes to everything just because I felt guilty or afraid of confrontation. I wasn't some sort of martyr who had to give up her time and her plans for the sake of others. I wasn't a babysitter. I was a sister, a daughter, an individual with my own life, my own career, and my own priorities. But I wasn't sure how to say that without sounding resentful or hurtful. I needed to figure out what to do, and I needed to do it fast. I couldn't spend an entire week feeling trapped in a situation I didn't want to be in. I had to find a way to balance being there for my family and standing up for myself. But the question was, how? That afternoon, I went to a cafe to get some work done, hoping the change of scenery would help clear my mind. I opened my laptop, but the screen was a blur. I couldn't concentrate on the emails that had piled up. Instead, my thoughts kept drifting back to the text from Lauren, to the cruise, to the way I felt so powerless in this situation. It was then that I realized something. This wasn't about the cruise. It was about setting boundaries. It was about finding a way to communicate my feelings honestly and openly, without feeling like I had to apologize for wanting to be considered, for wanting to be included in decisions that affected me. My family had gotten used to me being the one who didn't complain, who didn't rock the boat. But that wasn't who I was. At least, not anymore. I couldn't just roll over and agree to watch the kids, pretending like I was okay with it, when I wasn't. That wouldn't be fair to me or to them. If I was going to do this, if I was going to watch the kids for a week, I needed to set some boundaries. I needed to make it clear that I wasn't a backup option or a last resort. I had my own life, and my time was just as valuable as theirs. I closed my laptop and ordered a coffee, trying to put things into perspective. I didn't want to come off as angry or accusatory when I talked to my sister, but I also couldn't pretend like I wasn't upset. I had to express my feelings, even if it made them uncomfortable. I needed to stand up for myself. I needed to show them that I was more than just the person they called when they needed help. The next day, I picked up the phone and called Lauren. My heart was racing and my palms were sweaty as I dialed her number. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, but I was still nervous. What if she got defensive? What if she didn't understand? "Hey, Lauren," I said when she picked up. "Hey, how's it going?" she asked, sounding cheerful. "I'm good," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Listen, I wanted to talk to you about the cruise and the babysitting thing." "Of course, what's up?" "Well, I've been thinking about it, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page," I began, trying to sound as calm as possible. "I'm happy to watch the kids for you, but I also want to make sure that this doesn't become a regular thing. I feel like sometimes I'm asked to step in without being asked if I'm available or if it's a good time for me. And I know I agreed to it, but I just wanted to let you know how I'm feeling." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her shifting, probably trying to understand what I was saying. "I get it," she said slowly. "I didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't have a choice. I really appreciate you helping us out, and I totally understand where you're coming from. I just didn't think to ask." I felt a bit of relief. She wasn't defensive, she was listening, but I knew the conversation wasn't over. "I just don't want this to be something that happens all the time," I continued. "I don't want to feel like I'm always the one who has to take on this role when you need something." "I hear you," Lauren said. "I'm sorry if it felt like we were taking advantage of you. We definitely don't want you to feel that way." We talked for a few more minutes, and by the end of the conversation I felt better. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I had spoken up, and she had listened. Maybe this was the beginning of a new way of handling things. One where I could still help out without losing sight of my own needs and boundaries. That night, I felt a little lighter. I had made the decision to speak up, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was doing something for myself. I wasn't going to let my family take me for granted anymore, and I wasn't going to let my resentment fester. I had taken the first step in taking control of my own life again. Thursday evening came too soon. I had spent the past few days mentally preparing myself for the week ahead, but no amount of planning could truly prepare me for the reality of what was about to unfold. The kids, Emma and Max, had been excited all day. They were bouncing off the walls at the thought of spending a whole week with me, and I couldn't help but smile at their energy. Still, underneath my calm exterior, I was already feeling the weight of what I had committed to. I loved them, of course, but I couldn't ignore the nagging sense of resentment that I had kept at bay in the days leading up to this. When Lauren and Tim arrived to drop them off, I tried to be as upbeat as possible, greeting them with a smile and pretending like everything was fine. It wasn't that I didn't want to be around the kids. I just didn't want to be in this position. I didn't want to be the default babysitter, the one who was only needed when everyone else was busy. It was becoming more evident with every passing minute that I had been taken for granted, and yet here I was, smiling through the discomfort, because that's what family did, right? They leaned on each other. "Thanks so much for doing this," Lauren said, as she handed me a bag filled with clothes, snacks, and all the usual stuff parents think they need to pack. "I know it's a lot, but the kids really love spending time with you, and you're such a big help." I forced a smile. "Of course, no problem. They're great kids." Tim gave me a hug. "We really appreciate it. Don't hesitate to call if you need anything." I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything else. I felt a twinge of guilt for the frustration I had been carrying with me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this whole situation was wrong. I wasn't their last resort. I wasn't some free caregiver who had nothing better to do than look after their kids. But I didn't say any of this. Instead, I just nodded and smiled, telling myself that I could get through this. After all, it was just a week. As soon as they left, Emma and Max were all over the place. They ran around the apartment shouting about what they wanted to do first. "Can we go to the park, Auntie?" Emma asked, her face lighting up with excitement. Max, who was younger and had a bit more energy than his sister, bounced on the couch. "Yeah, the park. The park. The park is supposed to be you and me." I took a deep breath and tried to push away the anxiety that was creeping up on me. I looked around the apartment. This was going to be a week of chaos. I had planned to get some work done over the next few days, but now it seemed like I would have to put that on the back burner. There would be no time for my own goals or needs. Everything would revolve around Emma and Max. As much as I loved them, I couldn't deny that I had my own life and responsibilities, but I knew it wasn't their fault that I felt this way. They were just kids, eager to spend time with their aunt, and I couldn't let my own frustrations affect them. "Okay, let's get ready," I said, forcing a smile. "We'll go to the park for a little while, and then maybe we can watch a movie when we get back." Their faces lit up, and for a moment I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe I could make this work. Maybe if I focused on them and their happiness, I could push my own feelings aside. Maybe I could actually make this fun. The park was a whirlwind. I spent the next hour pushing them on swings, watching them race around and trying to make sure neither of them hurt themselves while they played. Every time I looked at my phone, I saw work emails piling up, and the frustration started to mount again. I couldn't focus on my own tasks. There was always something that needed my attention. Max wanted a snack, Emma needed help with her shoes, and I was constantly switching between being a playmate and a parent. Every now and then, I would hear parents chatting and laughing with their friends or partners while I was running after the kids, and it was a stark reminder of how different my life was in that moment. After the park, we went back to my apartment, where I made them dinner. They were both starving, of course, and I found myself cooking a quick meal of pasta while they argued about what show to watch. It was a routine I had done 1,000 times, making sure they were fed, then trying to get them to settle down for the night. By the time I put the plates in the sink, I was exhausted. The first day hadn't been so bad, but I could already feel the toll it was taking on me. There was no time for a break, no time to breathe. It was just task after task after task. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt so drained. After dinner, I tried to get them into bed. They were both bouncing off the walls again, asking for one more story, one more game. It felt like the day would never end. When I finally got them settled, I slumped into the couch, rubbing my temples. I hadn't realized just how much energy this would take out of me, and I knew this was just day one. There were still 6 more days to go. I tried to relax for a bit, catching up on some of my work, but it was hard to focus with the constant noise of children in the background. I found myself rushing through emails, trying to get as much done as possible before they woke up the next morning. I knew this wouldn't be sustainable. I couldn't keep going at this pace without burning out. I needed to find a way to balance everything, but I wasn't sure how. The next morning was a repeat of the day before. More running around, more distractions, and more feeling like I was failing at managing it all. I had work piling up, but I couldn't ignore the kids. They needed my attention, and I was there to give it to them. I tried to plan activities to keep them entertained, but it felt like I was always one step behind. They wanted to go to the zoo, the aquarium, the trampoline park, places that required a lot of energy and a lot of time, and all of it was at the expense of my own plans, my own time. By day 3, the exhaustion was starting to hit me hard. I found myself snapping at the kids more often than I wanted to. Emma spilled juice on the carpet, and I couldn't hide my irritation. Max was in a particularly fussy mood that day, and nothing I did seemed to calm him down. I wanted to scream, but instead I took a deep breath and forced myself to smile. They were just kids. They didn't know how much I was struggling. As the days passed, I realized that I was becoming resentful. It wasn't the kids' fault, but I couldn't help it. I had no time for myself, no time to relax or unwind. Everything was about them. And I knew it was only going to get worse. Lauren and Tim checked in every night, sending messages asking how things were going. "Hope you're having fun with the kids," they would say. "We're so relaxed here, everything is great." Those messages, while well-meaning, stung. I wasn't having fun. I wasn't relaxing. I was doing everything I could to keep the kids happy while my own needs were being ignored. I started to resent the fact that they were so carefree while I was stuck in a whirlwind of responsibilities. One night I sat down to dinner with Emma and Max, who were happily digging into their food. I looked at them, and for a moment I felt guilty for feeling the way I did. They were just kids, after all. They didn't understand the burden I was carrying. They didn't know that I was struggling to keep up with them while also trying to keep my life in balance. But then I remembered something my therapist had told me years ago, that it was okay to set boundaries, even with family. It was okay to say no. It was okay to take care of myself, even if it meant disappointing others. I had let this situation go on for too long without standing up for myself, and it was starting to take its toll. That night, after I put the kids to bed, I decided that I couldn't keep going like this. I had to find a way to get my own life back, even if it meant having difficult conversations with Lauren. This wasn't sustainable. I couldn't just keep doing everything for everyone else while my own needs went unmet. I had to make them understand that my time, my energy, and my mental health were just as important as their vacation. The reality of babysitting had set in, and I knew I had to take control before it completely consumed me. By the fourth day, I had reached my breaking point. I had tried to keep it together, tried to push through the exhaustion, tried to bury my resentment deep down so I wouldn't let it affect the kids. But it was getting harder and harder to maintain the facade. Every day felt like a repeat of the one before, each more draining than the last. The endless cycle of meals, playtime, cleaning up messes, running errands, and answering endless questions was taking a toll on my energy, my patience, and my sense of self. I had started to feel like I was losing control of everything, even though I was the one responsible for managing it all. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion, although that was certainly a big part of it. It was the emotional drain. I was constantly trying to appease Emma and Max, making sure they had everything they needed, keeping them entertained, trying to make them happy. At the same time, I was trying to juggle my own life, the work I hadn't been able to focus on, the personal time I had given up, and the space I had sacrificed to accommodate their needs. It wasn't that I didn't love them, because I did, but it wasn't sustainable, and I couldn't pretend that it was anymore. That evening, after another exhausting day of taking them to the pool, followed by dinner and endless rounds of bedtime stories, I collapsed onto the couch. My body felt like it was made of lead. I had tried to hold it all together, but I was done. I needed a change. I needed to find a way to express how I felt, to stop pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I looked around the apartment, trying to push away the frustration that was bubbling to the surface. It was hard to ignore the messy kitchen, the toys scattered everywhere, the laundry that had piled up over the past few days. I was constantly cleaning up after them, but it never seemed to end. The moment I cleaned one area, another mess appeared, and all the while I was drowning in my own sense of resentment. Hey. I glanced at my phone. There was another message from Lauren. Hope you and the kids are having a great time. We're loving the cruise. Just wanted to check in and see if everything is going okay. I stared at the message for a long moment, my finger hovering over the keyboard. I knew I needed to respond. I couldn't keep hiding how I was feeling. I had already tried to bury it, tried to tell myself that this was just a temporary situation, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was overwhelmed, and it was starting to wear me down. Finally, I typed, "Hey, I'm glad you guys are having a good time. I wanted to be honest about how things have been going here. I love spending time with the kids, but I'm feeling really stretched thin. I wasn't expecting to be the only one taking care of them for a whole week, and it's been a lot more difficult than I thought. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep up with everything." I stared at the message for a moment, rereading it several times, making sure I wasn't being too harsh. I didn't want to sound angry, but I didn't want to sugarcoat it either. I was tired. I needed to say something. After a few seconds, I hit send and waited. The response came quicker than I had expected. Lauren's message popped up almost immediately. "Oh no, I had no idea you were feeling like this. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how much you were taking on. Please don't feel like you have to do it all. We didn't mean for you to feel overwhelmed. Let's talk when we get back. I promise we'll make it up to you." Her reply was almost a relief. I hadn't known what I was expecting. Maybe a defensive response, maybe an apology, but I hadn't anticipated her being so understanding. And yet, as I read her words, I realized that what I had said was true. I couldn't keep doing this, not without jeopardizing my own well-being. And now it seemed like Lauren was finally beginning to understand that. I let out a long, shaky breath. It was done. I had said my piece. The weight that had been pressing down on me for the last few days started to lift, just a little bit. There was still the matter of finishing out the week, but at least I had taken the first step toward regaining some control over the situation. The next morning I woke up with a slightly different perspective. I had to be honest with myself. I was tired, but I was also capable. I had made it this far and I could finish the week. But I also knew that I couldn't keep running on empty. The next few days would have to be about balance. I couldn't sacrifice my own needs just to keep up with the demands of the kids, and if I had learned anything, it was that I couldn't do it alone. I spent the morning with the kids, but this time things were different. Instead of trying to keep up with everything, I decided to take a step back. I wasn't going to be the perfect aunt, the one who did everything for them. Instead, I would do what I could, but I would also give myself space. When Max wanted to play a game, I played with him, but I didn't force myself to do it for hours. When Emma wanted to bake cookies, I helped her, but I didn't stress over the mess. I allowed myself to let go of the pressure to be perfect. That afternoon we went to the park, but this time I took a book with me. While they played, I found a quiet spot under a tree and let myself read for a while. I didn't feel guilty about it. I knew the kids were safe and they were having fun. I had given myself permission to take a break, something I hadn't done at all during the past few days. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, I took a long, hot shower and sat down to finally enjoy a quiet evening. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. I had learned something important. I couldn't keep running on empty. It wasn't sustainable. And I had to set boundaries, not just for the sake of my own well-being, but for my relationships, too. When Lauren and Tim came back on Friday, I was ready for them. I wasn't angry anymore, but I had taken the time to think about how I would approach the conversation. I knew that what had happened wasn't entirely their fault. I had let myself get overwhelmed, and I hadn't communicated my feelings earlier. But I also knew that I couldn't go back to being the go-to babysitter for everything. They walked in with smiles, looking tan and relaxed, and I could immediately tell they had had a great time. They were all smiles as they asked about the kids and how the week had gone. I could tell they were expecting a positive report, but as we sat down together, I knew it was time to have a real conversation. "I'm glad you two had a great time," I said, looking at both of them. "But I need to be honest with you about how the week went. I love spending time with Emma and Max, but it was a lot. I was juggling work, trying to take care of the house, and keeping up with everything. It was exhausting. I really appreciate you trusting me with the kids, but I also need to make sure I'm taking care of myself, too." Lauren looked at me, her face softening. "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you were feeling that way. We never meant to put so much pressure on you. I thought it would be easy for you since you love the kids, but I can see how overwhelming it must have been. I just need to make sure I'm setting better boundaries in the future," I said, feeling the tension begin to ease. "It's not that I don't want to help, but I can't keep sacrificing my time and energy like that without burning out. I need to take care of myself, too." Tim nodded in agreement. "You're absolutely right. We should have checked in with you more. I'm sorry we didn't." The conversation was uncomfortable, but it was necessary. I could feel the shift in the air. They weren't defensive and they weren't brushing off my feelings. They were listening, and that meant the world to me. I realized that this wasn't just about me venting. It was about finding a way forward. It was about establishing mutual respect, where my needs were just as important as theirs. By the time they left to pick up the kids, I felt a sense of closure. I had taken control of the situation, and while it wasn't easy, it was worth it. I had learned an important lesson, that it was okay to say no, that it was okay to set boundaries, and that my well-being mattered. As I closed the door behind them, I finally felt like I could breathe again. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, and I knew that from now on, I would always prioritize myself as much as I prioritized the people I loved.